All right, welcome to the show, everybody. Crash the Net podcast, episode number 5. Today we're covering the KCC 3 playoff round recap for rounds 1 and 2, and the quarterfinals predictions as well. Today I'm flying solo. Stonewall Civ had something come up with his PC, not turning on right now. Not really sure what happened over there, but nonetheless, we'll be flying solo today. And let's jump right in. And thank you for the follow, Luigi and Burnsy, with the follows early. And here's the start for our round 1 recap. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this, just kind of going to show you guys who won and lost in round number 1. And moving right into it, we'll start with our first series, Entourage sweeping Coastline. Coastline did not show up to this one. They just could not field a lineup. Some drama happened over there, splitting up, all that good stuff. So Entourage moving on to round 2. And in our next one, another sweep, Composure taking on the forfeit wins from the Railroad. Nothing to see there as well. Vertigo taking all 3 against Tormatic Gaming, who did show up to play, and props to them for taking the beating they did against a team like Vertigo, not forfeiting their games like the previous 2 matchups. And Instinct taking on Rips, destroying them in the first 2 games. After the 14-1 victory in game number 2, Rips said, hey, that's enough. Take your forfeit win. Enjoy round number 2. And moving right along, Highlanders sweeping Astronomical. Nothing to see there, really. Starstruck sweeping Blue Line Bakery. Put one of their games in the wrong spot, but it was a sweep. Olympia taking down Magical with some big scores. And Colossal losing to Prodigy in 3 games as well. Now we get to some interesting scores here. Phantoms and BBB. This one was a shocker for me because I really thought BBB would take this in 5. So to see them get swept, and I mean, you know, they lose 2-0, 4-2, and 3-2. So really only one of those games they were in till the end. And for a team like BBB, you know, a couple of tournaments now that it's a couple of disappointments for some high-flying talent on that roster, and they got to figure it out. They brought in Duck for this event and thought Duck would be able to bring some offense to this club, but they did not match up well against Phantoms, and Phantoms found a way, and they keep buzzing since giving Letnov the boot or him quitting, whichever it is. Moving right along, Virtual Brothers with a sweep over Anaheim Ducks Gaming. This is another series that I predicted wrong. I predicted this one to go 5 as well. I thought Anaheim Ducks Gaming would take it in 5. But you see the scores, 3-2, 2-1, 3-2. This was a grinded out game. And I did not watch this series, but from the people I talked to, you know, there were chances on both sides in each of these games. So definitely a lot closer than the sweep will tell you. Moving on to another feature series, Resilience and Ice. And I didn't catch all of this one, but I did catch game number 5. And just judging by the stats, I mean, this was an interesting one because Resilience dominated time on attack in all of the games except for game 3. Game 3, Ice did dominate Resilience. But even in that game 5, they found a way to hang around despite being dominated. So props to Ice for giving Resilience a very good series there. And now moving on to the series I did cover last week, Millionth taking on Delusions. And Millionth found a way to just, you know, win it in 4. I thought this one had 5 written all over it again. And this was a very exciting series to watch. Guys on both sides flying up and down the ice. But Millionth found a way to punch it in and move on to round number 2. And 4 more games here. We got next up taking down Momentum in 4 games. Rise to Fame taking one over the Gabagoons. I thought Gabagoons would take this one. And Rise to Fame just showed up and showed out, and they moved on to round number 2. Moving right along, Eclipse taking down Freaks and Geeks. You look at the score in this series. Freaks and Geeks loses game number 1 7-1 and then wins game number 2 7-3 before dropping the next 2 games by big scores. And that's just something that's crazy to look at. And that's, you know, it tells you, hey, any game, you know, if you don't show up, you can lose. So props to Freaks and Geeks for taking that one. And then finally, our last series, Stealth and the Hands team. And Stealth, you know, as we predicted, just showed up and sent the Hands team packing in 4 games. And now we'll move on to our round number 2. We'll keep chugging right along here. This podcast won't be very long again, just myself for the time being. So we'll move right along into our round number 2 recap. And it starts with Entourage and Millionth. Millionth losing in a sweep, and this one was not close. And for an Entourage team that is playing at the top of their game, I still expected Millionth to put up a bigger show out than they did, losing 5-1, 6-2, and 5-1. And I believe they didn't have their goaltender Burns in net in this series. And how much of a factor that played, I'm not too sure. I did not get a chance to watch this series. But, you know, Burns, a world-class goaltender. Obviously, they missed him in this series. But, I mean, that series was not close. And another series that wasn't close was Prodigy and Rise to Fame. Rise to Fame did not show up to game number 1. They forfeited game 1. Game number 2, they lost 5-1. And at game number 3, they lose 4-0. So clearly, I mean, they were happy with their top 16 finish, and that was that. They moved right along. And they went home in round 2. So moving on to Olympia and Virtual Brothers, yet another sweep. And this one was a little close. 2 one-goal games for the Virtual Brothers against Olympia. And hey, you know, you never know. They showed up and they gave Olympia a hard series despite going home in a sweep. Now moving on to probably the biggest upset, Phantoms taking down Resilience in a sweep. And this one is just, you know, a little mind-boggling. As Gilly says, it was easy, of course. Of course. But hey, the score indicates a little differently, but, you know, we'll move right along. And yeah, Phantoms. I mean, Phantoms are rolling right now and take down a Resilience team that just flat out did not show up for the series. Whether they took Phantoms too lightly, whether, you know, they just played bad, whatever, you know, it is, they went home in a sweep. And that is not something I predicted. And if anything, I would have predicted that Resilience would have swept them. So props to Phantoms for figuring it out after I think they went 0 for 4 the first night of this tournament and really never looked back. So props to them on that. And moving on to the next 4 games, we had Composure taking down Stealth in 4 games. And Stealth, while they were a very good regular season team, they ran into Composure in round 2. And that's a tough matchup anytime you see it. And now moving on to Vertigo and Highlanders. And the elimination games continue to plague Dangs, who cannot figure it out at crunch time. He finds a way to put his team in a position to send the other team home in an elimination game and cannot get it done, whether it's PSN, Xbox, esports. I mean, you got to feel for the guy losing this many elimination games. It's kind of insane how he's always right there, but has not taken that next step to, you know, get a win over a Vertigo team in an elimination game like this. So they go home in game 5 after a hard-fought series. And Eclipse and Instinct. This was the series I called last week, and a very, very entertaining series. It was back and forth, not too much trapping going on, but a lot of counterattack on both sides. And it was just a 1-2 punch every game. And you see the scores. I mean, each team took their turn in this series. And you have a lot of playmakers on both sides that found a way to put the puck past the goaltenders in this one. And it was a very entertaining series. And Eclipse was rewarded with the win. And now moving on to the final series of round number 2. Next up and Starstruck. Starstruck taking it against Next Up in a sweep. And that first game 1, that 1-0 loss was not a forfeit. They just lost 1-0. And now we'll move into our quarterfinals predictions. And in our quarterfinals, hey, you know, the stakes get higher and higher as we keep chugging along. And for our first matchup, we have the 18 seed Phantoms taking on the number 2 seed Prodigy. And this should be a good one. The Phantoms are playing at the top of their game, but they're running into a Prodigy squad that seems to get better and better as the events go on. We'll see what Twist is able to bring to the table against a Prodigy team. He's very familiar with them. They're going to have to really get a game plan against the high flyers of Prodigy. You got to find a way to defend the boards against Cad. Cad works with his speed so well. And even along the defense, you have Desi and you have Geimer, who are just so skilled with the puck. But then you look on the other side, and you got Kanger and Heber. And, you know, they've been very, very good through playoffs so far and have found a way to help get their team a victory. And despite that, you know, I got to go with Prodigy in this one. And Phantoms, hey, they proved me wrong twice, but I'm still not going to pick them in this series because I think Prodigy is just a really tough pick. And thank you for the follow, Freaky Finger Fritz. And yeah, I got to go Prodigy, and I'm going to give a game to Phantoms. I think Prodigy takes this one in 4. And, you know, whether or not the Phantoms like running with that underdog role, we'll see. But, You know, again, a 2 seed taking on an 18 seed in the quarterfinals. Gotta tip my hat to Prodigy on this one. I think they're taking it home and going into the semis. Thank you to the follow, First Master QC. And now for our next series, we have the 12 seed Eclipse taking on the 7 seed Starstruck. And this should also be a very good series to watch. You have heavyweights on both sides. Marco, Mateer, Soilos is one of the best right wings in the game. And on the other side, you have Fog, Skillsy, Stammer. I mean, everyone in this lineup, very, very high-flying players. And this should be a very, very exciting series. And both teams are not going to be running the 5-0 trap. Both teams are going to be running very heavy forechecks. So for the D-men, if you're not looking up when you get that puck, it's being turned over and you're going the other way. So for both of these teams, it's going to be very interesting who comes away with more opportunities offensively off of those forechecks. And while Eclipse has had a very good run, Rick Shell has not played in playoffs yet. And while Eclipse has had a very good run, I got to give this one to Starstruck as well. Starstruck taking the KCC event number 2. And just, man, it is a hell of a team over there and one of the best in the league. And I think they'll take this one. Might go 5 games. You know, I think Eclipse can steal 2 from Starstruck, and I think Starstruck will get it done in 5, as we've seen J-Claws, kind of the opposite of Dangs. J-Claws always finds a way to win those elimination games. As Luigi says, Starstruck goats. Yeah, I got to agree, man. That's it. This lineup that they put together, unbelievable. And moving on to our next matchup, Vertigo and Olympia. I cannot wait for this matchup. This is the matchup I will be calling tomorrow night. And we got 2 13-1 teams going head-to-head. The 11th seed Vertigo taking on the 5 seed Olympia. And champions everywhere. I mean, you look up and down the lineup, just guys that have won in these esports leagues. Obviously, Olympia, you know, everyone's kind of chasing Olympia right now. Olympia seems to always find a way to either win the finals or lose in the championship. So for Vertigo, you know, you're staring down a behemoth on the other side in Olympia that can't seem to mess up right now. They have Neil in net instead of Reigns through playoffs so far. Not sure if Neil has taken that starting job from Reigns or if Reigns just hasn't been around. Reigns obviously one of the best goaltenders in the game. So surprising to see him not in the lineup yet in playoffs. But we'll see what happens there. And then, I mean, you look at Gilly. I mean, I just talked about Soilos being one of the best right wings. Gilly is, you know, if not better, just equal to, and 2 of the top 3 right there. And you look at the other side as well, just star-studded lineups. And thank you for the follow, Gabsy. And this should be a very good one. I mean, this is going to be a complete chess match, in my opinion. Just, you know, who waits for the other team to make that mistake? And if you're Vertigo, I mean, I'm not sure if they're going to have Risto or Augie in, and that could play a factor as well, depending on who's able to make the games. So roster changes certainly could play a factor, and definitely cannot wait to call this series tomorrow night. And man, I got to go with the recency bias here, and I'm going to go Olympia in 5. Moving along to Composure and Entourage, the 6 seed Composure, the 1 seed in the tournament Entourage, and you have Odie taking on his former team in Composure. And this was another series I wanted to call, but Entourage and Composure, it seems like they play each other every event. We've called this exact matchup a ton of times, and got to go with Olympia and Vertigo and get some different faces in there for this event. But nonetheless, just 2 powerhouse teams yet again. And it's always the same teams in the mix that get this far. So once you get into round 3 and deeper, you're always going to be playing another really, really solid team. Obviously, more of a run and gun style out of Entourage, but with the addition of Odie, they've slowed things down a little bit. Reg's moving up to center, bringing back George on lefty, and it's really worked out for them. They have not skipped a beat since replacing 2 of the best players in the world in Scary Joey and Guan. So it's kind of crazy that you lose 2 of those players and it doesn't impact your team at all. And that's really saying something about the rest of the squad and who they have on the lineup. And for Composure, same thing. You lose a guy like Odie, you bring in Delisle, and your team's not missing a beat either. And for a team that has just been so dominant possession-wise against a team that has been so run and gun, these matchups are always exciting because it's just, a clash of a Titans matchup. And in this matchup, I got to go with Entourage, and I'm picking Entourage in 5. I think this one goes 5 as well. Always seems destined to, and all roads in the quarters and semis lead through an Entourage Composure series. Thank you for the follow, Billy. And Luigi thinks Entourage takes this one 3-1. Oh man, only giving Composure 1 game in this one. I'm gonna give him 2. I think this does go 5, but hey, you never know. Both of these teams just playing absolutely lights out. And again, man, this was a really, really quick podcast, guys. I just wanted to make sure I put out some content for you guys. We did make a YouTube, so follow us on YouTube, please. Crash the Net Podcast on YouTube. Trying to get to 100 subscribers so we can change our URL and get a custom URL, because right now it's something crazy. I believe, let me see here. And there's the YouTube link for you guys. If you can follow us, would greatly appreciate it. Going to try and pump out as much ESHL content for you guys as possible. So would really appreciate a follow or subscribe over there. And any questions or closing comments? And my closing comment is, I can't wait for a great 2 nights of hockey coming up the next 2 nights. Henry says, fun fact, Entourage hasn't lost a series to Composure in 2 years other than the biggest tournament of all time in the Sharks event. That's insane, Henry. Absolutely mad. I did not know that. I thought they've gotten the better of you guys a couple times, but interesting to know that 1 time in 2 years. And you guys, like I said, seemed to all roads through the quarterfinals and semifinals seem to take you to an Entourage Composure matchup. And Marco says false, and Luigi also says cap. So maybe someone's got to fact check Henry on that one. A couple guys questioning it. And, do you guys have any questions in chat before I take off here? And again, my closing comments are, follow us on YouTube. Going to try to pump out as much comments or as much content as possible for you guys. As Gilly says, Composure had the menace, didn't count. And, we have an interview with Brody coming up. And if you guys have any ESHL specific related questions, we'd love to hear them. Hit us up in our DMs because I definitely want to bring kind of a different perspective to this ESHL space. It's something that's been negated for a long time, and it's something that we really want to start providing as much content as possible. And if you guys have any burning questions for Brody, please let us know. That'll be coming up. Going to start doing interviews relatively soon with NHL 22 coming out. So if you guys are looking to get on the show, want to talk about some of your experiences being top players in this space, also let us know. And Marco says, when I was on lefty and Hero was on left wing, we didn't lose to you guys. Yeah, what tournament was that? Might have been Rux. Rux doesn't count. I mean real tourneys. Hey, well, if Rux doesn't count, does King's Coast count? I mean, that's a similar prize pool. As Luigi seems to agree on that one. And they had Jemima and K-Cut in their lineup. Yeah, I mean, a lot of throw-together lineups, but look at this KCC. A lot of throw-together lineups for the last event of 21. As we kind of, this is our final send-off for 21, guys. You wave it goodbye, and, good riddance, as 22 is on the doorstep in a couple of days here. And Marco says, I bet they would count if you won. And Rux is pay to play, so that is different than KCC, but in terms of the pot, they are similar. So I will agree with that Rux or that KCC is a sponsored tournament versus the Rux where you had to pay for entry. RIP 21, 22 will kill esports. I don't think so, Luigi. I really don't. I mean, all the top players are gonna find a way to be in the tournaments. Some of the sponsors, some of these tournaments might not get 100 teams. But as far as the better talent, I think you're going to have really an elevated level all around for esports. I think that the better teams are going to be playing the better teams more often in the regular season due to the numbers, and you're going to see more true standings. And you're not going to see, some of these Swiss formats where a team is out of it all season and then last week pops into the top 10. And as far as a broadcast perspective, I'm very excited for it, to be honest, Luigi. I think that 22 has dedicated some of their resources to the broadcasters. And part of that is the names popping up underneath the puck carrier and making it so that you have to watch the replays. I think that's going to bring a whole new dynamic to the esports space, and I cannot wait until we get our hands on that and we get in the booth for some 22 games. But with that being said, I don't see any questions in the chat, so I'm going to call it a podcast, and that's been fun. And he says the game is just poop is all. Hopefully the adjustments from the beta are good. From what I've heard, they did address some of the major concerns, puck receptions, shooting, all that stuff. But, you know, the game comes out in 2 days, so we'll see. And hopefully they did make those adjustments. And if they didn't, hopefully they listen to us after the game comes out with a tuner. But I saw a lot in 22 that I really liked, Luigi, to be honest. It felt and looked really good. The interceptions are great. I think that adds a whole new dynamic to the esports space that people are going to have to adjust on. And it's really going to force people to change the way that they play, and they can't just rely on holding RT and skating around the ice. And the best teams will still win. Yeah, I agree. The best teams will adapt to the gameplay, and that's really kind of something that always happens. And Jordan, not a fan of it at all. Did not like it. And honestly, I liked a lot of it outside of the passing. I think if they address the passing, I really like it. The sticks being its own layer, not going through the boards. When your stick's in the lane, the puck actually hits it. I think there's a lot of good. I think there's more good than bad for 22. And I think it is absolutely a jump from 21. And yeah, no, it really rewards team play, Hendry. That's absolutely right. You have to play as a team. You can't kind of make those arcadey passes that you were able to make before. But I think even though they did try to take that out, I think they could make it a little better. You know, a lot of the behind the back passes, when you go behind the net, any player in the league can make that pass. I don't think that's something you should get penalized on just because you're not looking at the player. But, you know, everyone's got their own opinion on it, and everyone will adjust whether or not. I mean, we all play this game a lot, right? So, as he says, I mean, good team. Sorry. Oh, man, Hendry calling him out. And see, you say it doesn't encourage creativity. I disagree. I think it forces you to be more creative, to be honest. You do have to figure out new ways to score. I think that's how the game is. And yeah, everyone's going to talk about tipping in front, and that is going to be a part of the game. But I really feel like it encourages team play and creativity. You're going to be rewarded for passing the puck quick along the blue line, and you're going to be rewarded for hitting the high guy in the slot. And to be honest, Jordan, like that's something your team does very well, is hitting the high guy in the slot with those passes from the corner up to Gilbsy. I think your team will honestly make a big step in the next game because of the way that you guys play. Yeah, you can't make a no-look cross-ice pass. That's agree. Well, see, so Luigi, that is something that needs to be addressed. The ability to actually make a one-touch pass absolutely needs to be addressed. And the interceptions, I mean, we can live and die by that. I think people are going to have to learn that, you know, auto sauce is not going to save you anymore. You're really, if you want a pass to get through, you're going to have to time a manual sauce, or you're going to have to risk a bank shot up the boards. But yeah, no, one touch is definitely passing. The idea of what they're trying to do makes sense. The implementation right now needs work. You need to be able to receive a pass. I mean, it is a video game. There is a point where realism, like, yeah, you can snap a hard pass at someone. They're not going to fumble it. And you shouldn't fumble, you know, 90% of passes in this game. But yeah, no, Hendry, you're absolutely right. You have to really create a lane. If a guy's stick is near the lane, they're actually going to pick up the puck, which was most people's biggest complaint about NHL 21. So it's something that they heard and said, hey, you know, let's fix that. And thank you, Zach, for the follow. And with that being said, guys, I'm going to close this podcast out. It's been a fun, quick podcast. Catch us tomorrow night for the Vertigo and Olympia series. We'll be calling that one on the RD Sports channel. I will be with King Lime tomorrow in the booth, and look forward to that. Thank you guys for all hanging out. And once again, if you do want to give us a follow on our YouTube, that would be greatly appreciated as well. Thanks, guys.